Hi everyone, it's Christopher, Mono County Library Director and co-host of the Oxygen Starved podcast. It's Book Talk Friday, so I've got two great library books for you to check out. Now, living in an old big city like New York, you realize quickly it's made up of multitudes of small communities side by side, yet quite distinct from each other. Some of that's lessening with today's chain stores and gentrification, but you still find neighborhoods whose past has afforded them unique recognition. There's Little Italy, there's Chinatown, The Village, Williamsburg, Brighton Beach, yet few evoke the mystique of Harlem, which straddles the island of Manhattan across the top of Central Park. It started out in colonial times as a Dutch village, but by the 20th century was the epicenter of African American culture in the Northeast, and it's the setting for today's choices. Now, James Baldwin was born in Harlem in the 1920s during the height of the Harlem Renaissance, when art and jazz and writing was spiraling out into the wider world. Raised, resented, and mistreated by a man who wasn't his father, Baldwin had a hard time finding his place and ultimately left for Paris in his 20s, where he lived much of his life. Go Tell It on the Mountain tells the story of a young John Grimes' 14th birthday day and brings themes of Baldwin's own difficult childhood into the storyline, namely his difficult relationship with his stepfather and religion and racism. It was Baldwin's first major novel, and it came out in 1953. Now, religion gives a structure to the story, allowing much context and backstory to be brought into the events of that one day by articulating it in the personal prayers of some of the characters to highlight the struggles they each went through to arrive where they are that day. This also serves to make the story an introspective one for John Grimes, leaving his childhood behind and entering adulthood. And while the day brings a couple of momentous moments, his brother Roy beat up by a gang of white men, his mother disclosing to his stepfather that she knows of an illegitimate child of his own from an adulterous affair, the story ends with them walking home from church as a family, but John a little apart, knowing perhaps that he's growing into his own person and can engineer his own future. The novel is somewhat based on Baldwin's own life. In fact, he started writing it when he was 17 years old, finishing it over a decade later. It solidified his reputation as a man of letters and purpose and activism for the rest of his life until he died in 1987. And if you listen to the Oxygen Starved podcast, you'll recognize this was our pick from our guest Shireen Dedman from early September, and we have a print copy. I'm showing you the ebook version you can check out with your library card. Now, Harlem inspires my pick for the new this week as well. Colson Whitehead's Harlem Shuffle. Harlem Shuffle was an R&B song that came out in the early 60s when this story is set and was later famously covered by the Rolling Stones. The novel states at the outset that Ray Carney was only slightly bent when it came to being crooked. And this sets the tone for the story. He owns a furniture shop on one of Harlem's main shopping thoroughfares. He and his wife live in a cramped apartment near the subway tracks, but they're about to welcome their second child, and while getting by is tough, it's good. It's Harlem, with that neighborhood as much a character in this book as any of the cast of characters Whitehead writes into the story, ranging in a largely loving way from upstanding Harlem business folks to the petty criminals that keep it alive. Ray himself is a striver, sitting at the junction of striving toward thievery and run-ins, which is an easy path, or striving towards being an upstanding business owner himself. A path Whitehead lays is only slightly straighter and narrower. The book is eminently readable, a heist novel that brims with character and a feel for New York City that still feels relevant today, and reviewers are loving it. The Atlantic review sums it up best. In the moral universe of Harlem Shuffle, the honest work is literal. The novel privileges the perspectives of thieves, mobsters, and prostitutes, all candid about the nature of their profession, over those who have convinced themselves that their own dubious machinations are ethical, which is to say bankers, real estate developers, and the suits who work to find them loopholes. Can theft really be a crime, the novel asks us, in a country built on it? The cops are all paid off. The characters fear payback, not jail time. Understanding all too well how little the world has to offer his characters, Black men and women who scrounge so that they can buy a piece of furniture from Ray's store on a payment plan, Whitehead cannot bring himself to deprive them of a small part in a caper. Few of his crooks get off entirely free. Still, many are given a brief moment to revel in the high of the heist, which is close enough. That was The Atlantic describing it. Other reviews are just as effusive of this thoroughly enjoyable read. This is Colson Whitehead's Harlem Shuffle, and this is, if I can get it up here, James Baldwin's Go Tell It on the Mountain. Both great books, both available from Mono County Libraries. Come in, find your next great read. In the meantime, stay safe and happy reading.